Mark Edwards is the executive director of Opportunity Nation, which, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a national bipartisan campaign of over 300 organizations who are dedicated to expanding economic mobility and closing the opportunity gap in America. Mark will challenge our traditional conceptions of what constitutes opportunity in America today and how we can focus in to create greater opportunity for all. Mark?
Great. Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. This has been an incredibly inspiring conference, and just hearing this last session, in many ways what we were talking about was really opportunity. What does opportunity look like? How do we think about it? How do we promote it? How do we engage it? Opportunity Nation is a national organization that is focused on increasing economic opportunity and mobility. I want to tell you about one of our tools called the Opportunity Index, but before I do that, I'd like to tell you just a little bit more a story about two individuals. These are two young people living in two counties in the US. One lives in Highlands County, Florida, the other in Ontario County, New York. These are two counties that are actually remarkably similar. They have almost identical unemployment rates, similar demographics, similar sort of makeups within each of these counties. And so one might think that a child growing up in one of those two places would have similar access to the American dream, right? Similar unemployment rates. But when you get beneath the surface, what you realize is that those counties are actually really quite different. The communities they live in are really fundamentally different. Look at the difference in the median household income, for example. The on-time high school graduation rate in Highlands County is only 6 out of 10. In Ontario County, nearly 9 out of 10 graduates from high school. The violent crime rate is very different. And so when we think about opportunity, when we think about access to the American dream, it's really more than just simply about jobs. Jobs are obviously central, but we need to think about opportunity as something that's much more than just simply that. The reality of what's happening in this country is, as many of you know, that this whole notion of the American dream, the idea that no matter who you are, if you work hard and play by the rules, you should be able to do well, that's beginning to erode. Increasingly, those who are born at the bottom of the income strata don't have the chance and the opportunity to move up. There's stickiness at both ends of the income spectrum. Those who are lucky enough to be born at the upper end tend to stay there. Those who are at the bottom end are also tending to stay there. And it runs so counter to how we think about ourselves as Americans. And these are sort of fundamental core American values, this idea of opportunity and access to the American dream. And so we also know that, in fact, the middle class, sort of that core American idea, is also no longer doing as well. That in European countries, places that we think about as being much more class stratified, are actually having much more mobility than we are. I never forget speaking to a young woman in South Central LA who said to me that the numbers in her GPA mattered less to her future than the zip code that she was born in, those numbers. You know, really a core idea that runs counter to how we think about ourselves as a country. So we're not going to do well if we leave a lot of our talent on the field. Our view is that opportunity is something that actually can be measured, and that we can measure them. We can actually work and manage towards that. And so in partnership with an organization called Measure of America, Opportunity Nation has developed something called the Opportunity Index, which is a statistical measure of the American dream. It's really a measure that says the communities that people come from have a powerful impact on how well they can do. And we can actually measure this. We can actually look at trends around this. And we can actually think about our work collectively to try to improve opportunity. And so the Opportunity Index is an open source tool. It's at opportunityindex.org. We rank all 50 states around opportunity. We take the 3,000 counties, and we actually give them grades A through F. I want to take you through a little bit sort of how that works and how I think it has an impact on all of our work. So when we began, we went out and talked to a number of people about what opportunity meant. We talked to people who lived in low-income communities. We talked to policymakers. We talked to academics. And we came up with essentially these 16 different measures of opportunity. And in some ways they're intuitive, right? They fall into a whole category around employment and the economy, right? Of course, it's a critical piece of opportunity. Education, we know, is a core driver of opportunity. But then a set of other characteristics that are really important in communities, what we call community health and civic life, those social capital pieces that are really important to opportunity. And so let me just take a quick sort of straw poll. How many of you do some of your corporate giving in the healthcare area? Okay. How many involved with increasing access and completion with high school? Okay, right? Access to healthy foods. How many of you have volunteer programs in your organizations? Right? How many of you pay wages to your employees? Okay. So all of us here are part of opportunity, right? I mean, these are all inputs into opportunity. And so what we've done with this tool at opportunityindex.org is actually find a way of sort of bringing these tools, these elements together, and then assigning scores. And so I encourage you to take out your smartphones. I'll pretend you're not looking at your email, and go to opportunityindex.org and plug in your zip code where you were born. Plug in the town that you were born in. And what will come up is a whole set of characteristics that not only look at what's actually happening in those communities, but also it's a comparative tool. So we can look at places that have similar demographics, similar kinds of people, and sort of say, how are they doing compared to opportunity? That just simply looking at unemployment alone is not enough, right? How do we look at these various attributes that really create the foundation for the American dream, and how are we doing? And what can we do to do a better job with that? So this is what it looks like when you go to opportunityindex.org. And for those of you who are looking at your computers, we have many more sort of graphical interfaces. But you basically can plug in your zip code. You can look at the scores that come out of that. We rank all 50 states, and we look at the 3,000 counties. This is a snapshot of what opportunity looks like in America. What you're looking at here is that the dark colored areas actually have more opportunity. The ones that are lighter colors have less opportunity. But what's much more interesting is you begin to look at different sectors. So here's a snapshot of what it looks like when we look just at the economic indicators, things like wages, median income. When you look at it on the educational axes, you see a very different picture. But then when you look at the top, we also rank all 50 states. When you look at those, these are the top 10 states around opportunity. Now, are any of you from these locations? Okay. So what's interesting about this list is that it's not the usual list, right? It's not just about median income. It's not just about unemployment rate. We were looking at this sort of confluence of all these factors that are really critical to opportunity. But of course, as important as states are, and of course people like rankings, so it drives a lot of the media around Opportunity Index, what's much more important, I think, is looking down to the county level, the community level. Because states, of course, are amalgams of lots of different kinds of communities. And so when you get down to the county level, that's really where you get a chance to see how individual counties, two counties that are right next to each other, who have sort of very similar makeups, have very different opportunity scores. What's sort of going on there, and what can we do about that? So one of the ways that we use the Opportunity Index at Opportunity Nation is we have a coalition of about 300 organizations, a whole set of large nonprofits, educational institutions, employers, members of the faith community have really come together to say, how can we increase economic opportunity and mobility? In doing so, we did some analysis on the Opportunity Index, and one of the things we discovered is when you look at all those 16 characteristics across education, employment, and community and civic health, what we found was that there were several indicators that actually had more input, more power in driving opportunity scores than others. And so when we look at that list again, the indicator that actually drives opportunity scores more than any other indicator is actually the indicator that measures the percentage of young adults aged 16 to 24 who are neither in school nor in work. So you think about that population. This is a group of young adults who are really not connected to education and employment. They're not in those sort of institutions. And what we found is that when communities have high numbers of those individuals, those communities tend not to do well. When communities actually have lots of young people who are connected, they do well. And that it affects entire communities. This is not just about the young people themselves. There tend to be ripples that go across communities. And so as a campaign, Opportunity Nation is using the index to really drive a set of ideas to increase connection for young people between the ages of 16 and 24. So when you look at those two counties I mentioned, Ontario County and Highlands County, you see very different outcomes for young people. Nearly 4 times as many young people aged 16 to 24 are disconnected in Highlands County as opposed to Ontario County. And what we know about this population is that they are eager to be connected, they want a second chance, they're eager to get involved in work, but they've had hiccups along the way. And so there are a whole set of ideas that we have as a campaign to really focus on this. This is important because the scale of the problem is massive. We're all paying for this. And so we have used the Opportunity Index as a way of sort of galvanizing communities to focus on this population as being something that's really in our collective self-interest to do a better job on. So specifically, we talk about ways to increase access to apprenticeships. We know it's important. We do a lot of work around supporting career and technical education. Our view as a coalition is that not every person is going to get a 4-year Bachelor of Arts degree, and we need to find robust pathways to make sure the young adults have lots of pathways to move forward. Bring partnerships between community colleges and employers, for example, to really try to make that pipeline as clean as we possibly can. And mentoring, which we know is absolutely essential. So there are a whole set of sort of public and private sector ideas cutting across sectors to really focus on this particular population. number of our partners use the Opportunity Index in lots of other ways. So we've got, for example, the City Foundation works to really focus on how do we look at some of the civic engagement indicators and how they actually drive opportunity scores. We have collaborations between governmental agencies, community colleges, and employers in Iowa who've said, let's collectively work to make sure that we're actually increasing opportunity and increasing our opportunity scores. They're quite competitive about it. They say, we're right behind Nebraska. We got to do a better job than that. And so they're actually working on increasing scores quite explicitly. They've actually arranged some of their policy making around it. We've seen corporate foundations who are trying to take pieces of the index and focusing their work, but trying to say, how does that ripple out into other aspects of opportunity? Because we understand the work we're doing is critical, but it's part of a larger message. And so this tool gets used in lots of different ways. We've had organizations that have said, we've got a set of student volunteers who are active and supporting. Let's make sure they understand what the Opportunity Index is, because that is actually a tool they can use in their communities to try to drive opportunity. So it's really been used. The state of Washington recently came out with a policy report that looked at the state of their state through the index as a way of saying that simply looking at unemployment was not enough. But the truth is that access to the American dream is about more than just jobs, that it's about a lot of other things as well. And so this tool has been a really useful thing to do as a way of measuring that. So in the end, I think our view, thank you. Our view as an organization is that we are not going to be successful as a country until we really restart the American dream. That the American dream is, of course, rooted deeply in jobs and employment, but it's also rooted in a whole set of other characteristics that are really critical to communities. And these communities have a profound value on the chances of our young people achieving their full potential. And so when we think about the index, we say, imagine if instead of thinking exclusively about sector success and the work that we're doing individually as corporate giving professionals, imagine if we thought about what is it doing to increase opportunity broadly. Imagine if legislators said, instead of just focusing on unemployment, we said elections should really rise and fall based on increasing opportunity scores. Right? Imagine if we said collectively, let's bring multiple sectors and organizations that are working as partners for all of us in this room. Imagine if we said instead, let's bring them together because we're all working on opportunity. That's really what we're doing. And we now have a way of measuring that and actually elevating that work in a collective way rather than just simply thinking about the silos that we're working in. And so when I go back to John and Jane and their communities that they live in, what we see is that John has a B in Ontario and Highlands County in Florida has a D+. Again, identical unemployment rates, vastly different kinds of opportunity. Our view is that we are not going to be successful as a country until all of our young people have a chance to achieve their full potential. We now have a way of measuring that. We have a way of really adding some real data to what's happening. One of the pieces that we're really interested in doing is going back and looking at opportunity scores over the last 50 years. Right? So there are places that have done very well. What happened 50 years ago? What happened not just from a policy-making perspective, but in terms of corporate engagement that changed the pathways for those communities and other communities that didn't do so well? Obviously, the employment picture, the wage picture is essential and a critical piece of it, but our sense is that it's more than that. When we look at the power of any individual silo, it's deeply connected to a whole set of other issues that are really important to opportunity, and we now have a way of taking a look at that. So in closing, I just want to say, the Opportunity Index now is only 3 years old, and we're excited about the ways in which lots of organizations are beginning to use it as a way of framing their work and being collected to this larger issue of opportunity. Opportunity is a core American ideal. It cuts across party lines, it cuts across sectors. It's something we all agree on. It's really part of our DNA as a country, and our view is that we have absolutely all the tools if we continue to work together across silos and sectors to really focus on increasing opportunity. Give us your feedback. We'd love to get your feedback about the tool. We're still essentially in beta form as we release new data points every single year. And sign up for, we'll be releasing new data for 2014 this fall. We'd love to have you engaged in that. And thank you for all the great work that you do.